We begin our treaty walk at the Paul Dojack Youth Facility, which also happens to be situated at the former location of the Regina Indian Industrial School. Just like the school before it, the youth facility has rows of trees lining the driveway. Lilac bushes were brought to North America by European settlers. There are no native species of lilacs found anywhere on this continent.
Smells like yummy. It's yummy.
Every lilac bush that you see is a descendant of those first few that were brought over in an attempt to colonize our landscape. Just as we were about to leave Dojack, we decided to turn around and to talk to the person that we had seen watching us on our treaty walk.
We saw you watching us, and now we're going to investigate. Actually on a treaty walk right now, and so we know that this was the former site of the Regina Indian Industrial School, and we're just trying to get as close as possible to get some...
I believe actually it's on...
Well, we know where the cemetery is.
Oh yeah, it's on the other side, and I don't think you can get around to it.
Yeah, we can actually.
Oh, can you?
Yeah, I think so. It's just off of Pinkey Road, so...
Oh, I didn't think
can,
you guys could get to it
We
at
can
all.
maybe drive, like... I believe the school was on this site. Do you have like rows of trees on the other side of this building?
No. On the further out.
On the north side?
Yeah, because we have a big part of land, but I think they're outside of our fence line. I don't think we have any trees within our fence line.
No, not in your fence line. Okay, so I mean the school was roughly built on this site. It's documented and.
No, yeah, we just saw you on camera, so I was coming out to see.
Hi, Dojack.
Indian industrial schooling in a Canadian context predates Confederation. By the 1840s, these schools were already in operation in Upper Canada, now known as Ontario. In the following decades, this type of schooling expanded to the west. The government of Sir John A. Macdonald commissioned Nicholas Flood Davin to visit Indian industrial schools in the United States. He later made recommendations for the establishment of similar institutions in the Canadian West. In the latter part of the 1800s, 4 industrial schools were established in Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. The Regina Indian Industrial School was operated by the Presbyterian Church of Canada from 1891 until 1910. It was built upon approximately 129 hectares of farmland on Wascana Creek, about 6 kilometers northwest of Regina. During its operation, approximately 500 Indigenous children as young as 3 and 4 years old from Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta attended in the school's 19-year history. Based on the Gradual Civilization Act of 1857 and the Davin Report of 1879, the goal of the industrial school was to assimilate First Nations children into a life of European standards. Industrial schools, along with boarding and day schools, constituted the core of a generally ill-fated and thoroughly colonialist-minded federal policy to Christianize and civilize Canada's Aboriginal children and youth, or, as it was frequently stated, to take the Indian out of the child. Royal Canadian Mounted Police property, no trespassing. Land ownership of the school property has changed numerous times over the years and a portion is currently held by private landowners, while the remainder exists as Crown and RCMP lands. In 2011, following the purchase of the land by current owners, the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee of the City of Regina was made aware of a cemetery located on the privately owned property. Given the location and a single gravestone within a fenced-off area, it was presumed the cemetery was connected to the Regina Indian Industrial School. In 2012, a study was conducted which identified 38 anomalies within the fence line that were presumed to be possible burials. In 2014, another study was conducted and identified another 6 anomalies outside of the fenced area, also presumed to be burials. This research confirmed the cemetery contained student remains of those who had attended the Regina Indian Industrial School between 1891 and 1910. The boys were trained in agricultural skills, carpentry, shoe and harness making, typesetting and printing, and painting, while the girls learned domestic tasks such as cooking and baking, laundry and ironing, dairying, knitting, sewing and dressmaking, setting and serving tables, and basic first aid skills. Graduates would eventually be placed in communities to demonstrate their skills and the effectiveness of the industrial school system. These locations were referred to as the colonies.
Who left this here?
Yeah, for the children.
Well, he put it there? But why is it there? But why are those things there?
In 1911, the building became the Regina City Jail, followed by a boys' detention house in 1919. The original building was destroyed by fire in January 1948. It was later demolished, and a facility for young offenders was constructed on the same site in 1955 and is still operational today. The center was named the Paul Dojack Youth Center after a Canadian Football League referee. Dojack also worked with troubled youth and was recreation director of the Saskatchewan Boys Training School for 10 years from 1965 to 1975. Today, the Paul Dojack Youth Center houses both male and female, however, mostly male young offenders. According to a Dojack employee, there is a high percentage of Indigenous youth housed at Dojack. However, the exact percentage is unknown.
Danse or stay. Aninjigo. These are some of the languages that were spoken by these children that were part of the residential school era legacy. This is the site of Regina Residential Industrial School back in the 1800s. And like myself, I'm a survivor from there, and these ones didn't survive. But I was told a while back by an elder who came to a gathering in Peterborough, Ontario, to not forget the children. They said that they were following him, and they said, don't forget us. And so that's why I've come here, just to commemorate this site and do a little smudge and just do a little prayer for all the children, and the people that died back in the early 1900s when the residential schools were being formed by the government of Canada and the churches of this country. Except the migrant, that's all I say for now.
The RIIS Commemorative Society have put in years of work to recognize the site. Now, it's Saskatchewan's 51st provincial heritage property.
It's like having a heavy fog on the land, and it's hard to walk in and around it. And over the years since I started coming here, it feels like it's slowly lifting.
TRC Call to Action number 71 states, "We call upon all chief coroners and provincial vital statistics agencies that have not provided the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada the records of deaths of Aboriginal children in the care of residential school authorities to make these documents available." TRC Call to Action number 72 states, "We call upon the federal government to allocate sufficient resources to the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation to allow it to develop and maintain the National Residential School Student Death Register." TRC Call to Action number 73 states, "We call upon the federal government to work with churches, Aboriginal communities, and former residential school students to establish and maintain an online registry for residential school cemeteries, including, where possible, plot maps showing the location of deceased residential school children." TRC Call to Action number 74 states, "We call upon the federal government to work with the churches and Aboriginal community leaders to inform the families of children who died at residential schools of the child's burial location and to respond to families' wishes for appropriate commemoration ceremonies and markers and reburial in home communities where requested." TRC Call to Action number 75 states, "We call upon the federal government to work with provincial, territorial, and municipal governments, churches, Aboriginal communities, former residential school students, and current landowners to develop and implement strategies and procedures for the ongoing identification, documentation, maintenance, commemoration, and protection of residential school cemeteries or other sites at which residential school children were buried." TRC Call to Action number 76 states, "We call upon the parties engaged in the work of documenting, maintaining, commemorating, and protecting residential school cemeteries to adopt strategies in accordance with the following principle. The Aboriginal community most affected shall lead the development of such strategies."
My grandmother and grandfather were arranged marriage and sent out to participate in they call it the colony out at Pipikassis.
Hill's grandparents were farmers there. Agriculture was a main trade taught at the school. She remembers them as kind, warm people. Traces surprised her after learning of their childhood trauma.
There was a lot of sickness, and the children having to face death of their schoolmates, being alone, maybe facing the possibility of their own death, and that fear and the trauma.
It was primarily tubercular related.
As we were walking to Dojack, my son grew tired. He hopped on my back, and while we enjoyed this part of our walk, he asked if the children in the cemetery that he had just seen, if they had done anything bad to deserve what happened. As a mother, I never could think about being in the place of the mothers that had to give up their children to go to residential school. Having my son with us on this treaty walk put things into perspective. It made it feel more real in a sense, that these were people like me, like my son. They were innocent children, and somehow I had to explain that to my son, that children just like him were buried in the cemetery, some as young as 3 years old. That's a very good question.
Why? Well, maybe.
You wondering? Just said you wonder. I wonder too. I wonder how many others are out there yet to be discovered. How many stories have not yet been told? How many other residential schools exist with cemeteries just waiting to be discovered?
So this is the Alex Yoke Museum at the Regina Public School Board office. They are not currently open. However, I did learn that there is a display set up here in this big long hallway specific to the Regina Indian Industrial School. An employee of the board who is currently the president of the Commemorative Association, Sarah Longman, has put this display together. So you'll see some books and other artifacts. I believe perhaps from the original school. So there's some photographs.
Many children died at the hands of the Regina Industrial School's malpractice, abuse, and spread of illness. Here are the names of the 14 students who have been confirmed to be buried on that site. Charlotte Head, enrolled June 11, 1896. Arthur Johnston, enrolled October 23, 1895 at age 14, who died January 1904 of tuberculosis. Alfred Mosine, enrolled June 16, 1898 at age 6. Edward Mountain, enrolled May 20th, 1891 at age 15, who died May 2nd, 1892.
I believe these are the same child. Kind of like a before and, after picture.
Lucy Picagwe, enrolled August 10, 1897 at age 12, who died in 1899. Hape Paul, enrolled February 3, 1899 at age 16, who died in March 1900. Thomas Threebolls, enrolled September 7, 1894 at age 15, who died July 17, 1896 of tuberculosis. And Alex Thunder, enrolled March 30, 1892 at age 11, who died October 1897 of scrofula. And in closing, we'd like to give some acknowledgement to those students not included in the school's admissions register, but found in the issues of the school's newspaper, The Progress.